The next thing I want to talk about is I want to talk about the craft. And for this, I need 2 volunteers to come up. Don't worry, it won't involve much physical labor. Come on up. Okay, Michelle. And Amanda, right?
Yes.
Yeah, Amanda was at our conference. So back there, you see that yellow thing?
Yes.
Go ahead and grab it, bring it up here. Good, hold it like that. Can anyone tell me what that is? Chin-up bar?
It's like the handle of a broom.
You might think it's a handle of a broomstick, but it really is what we call the proverbial bar. Okay? So for example, if you have to get over a bar, let's say you're a tax attorney and you have to do taxes for someone. What is the bar that you have to get over? Okay, Gigi?
CPA, the Certified Public.
Okay. So what I'm thinking about, your goal as a tax attorney is if you've got someone's return you want to get, you have to finish the return. It's pretty easy. You know, the government tells you how to fill it out. They don't really know how to do it, but they guess. So they tell you how to fill it out. You turn in the tax return and you come back without any kind of audit. So that's the bar. That's pretty easy to define, right? Okay. How about if you're a realtor? Has anyone been a realtor? We were talking about this last week. So what's a good bar for a realtor when they're trying to sell a house?
Make a profit.
Yeah, to sell the house, make a profit on it. So that's pretty easy to define, right? Well, how about for a writer? You know, I showed up and my bar was getting published. And I knew that I was ready to just leap over that bar. And I was wrong. Well, the problem is you don't really know where that bar is. So where do you think your mom thinks that bar of getting published is? Down, yeah, it goes way down. Where's your wife think it is? That's just a little bit higher there. Where's the publisher think it is? Yeah, you may not be tall enough for that. Okay, thanks. Go ahead and sit down. The problem with the bar in publishing is you don't know exactly where that is. Because it involves a lot of things. It involves the quality, it involves the market, it involves a lot of things that you really don't control. So many times I've thought my book is ready to be published, and I turn around and it's rejected because in one case, someone from Waterbrook said they didn't think it was very well written. Another case, they said, you know, that's kind of a little edgy for us, so it's not really something we want. So you can only do so much to reach that bar. So I think the really answer is you can't control the bar, but what you can control is you can't control yourself. And this is where it comes in practice. What you can do is you can control how much you practice. And the real answer is practice. Perfect practice makes perfect. You may not know where that bar is, but you have to keep on, be persistent, be prayerful until you can actually reach that bar. And there's a book by Malcolm Gladwell that I recommend a lot called Outliers. And in Outliers, Malcolm Gladwell talks about the fact that a lot of people that are successful spend about 10,000 hours at their craft. Talked about Bill Gates. Bill Gates, who lived near here, had access to computer systems and computer time at the University of Washington. And back then it was really expensive. You know, now we're hauling computers around in our pocket, but then it was really expensive. Bill Gates had unprecedented access to computers through his school, which helped him get a lot of hours of practice. The Beatles were successful because they had an opportunity to practice many hours a week. Most bands will practice a couple of evenings a week, then they'll go maybe play a Friday gig, Saturday night gig, so they really don't get that much practice. The Beatles, early in their career, went and worked at a resort in Germany where they were playing all day, almost every day, and they rapidly got up to those 10,000 hours. And their best albums really came out after the 10,000 hours. Malcolm Gladwell talks about violinists. The violinists who do 10,000 hours wind up as concert violinists. After that, maybe they're performed as an instructor or something like that, but it's the time that you put in, that perfect practice, that makes a difference. So what can you do about that? One thing is you can read books on the craft. And one of the books Mick recommended to me was Writing the Breakout Novel. Other people recommend other books that we actually have on our website. But read books on the craft. work with a critique group or partner. And early in my membership at NCWA, I worked with a critique group. They were a great critique group, but they really didn't focus on what I was doing, which was fiction. So I'm glad that I'm in a fiction group right now. The other thing is go to classes. We were talking about different classes. There's classes online. There's Jerry Jenkins' group. Our conferences have classes. A lot of us are members of the American Christian Fiction Writers, and we go to those classes and get outstanding teaching. But the key thing is to do the time. And this is what's tough, and we were talking about this on the break. Stephen King said something else. If you want to be a writer, you must do two things above all others. Read a lot and write a lot. Read good writing. As you're reading it, think about what do you like about this? Why is it good? And even what would I do differently to make it better? And write a lot. Now, I want to give an example of one of our more well-known members, and it's Jim Rhubarb. Jim Rhubarb was part of an accountability group with 5 people. And what he did was they set each week a word count. And your word count might be different because you might have other commitments, but you had a word count that you committed to each week. And at the end of the week, if you did not meet your word count, you had to pay every other member of that group $50. Yeah, so how much is that? Gigi? $200, because you don't. There are 5 people in a group, so you don't pay yourself. You have to declare income on all that on that side. All right, so basically $200 to all the. You have to pay $50 to the other people in the group. $200 if you didn't meet your deadline. You didn't meet your word count. So Jim says there were a lot of late nights where he was cranking to make sure that he did not have to write a check to his friends. So what happened to those 5 people? John Olson has written 6 books, and he's a Christie Award winner. Katie Cushman has 7 books with publishers like Bethany House. Jim Rhubarb has his 6th coming out in May, and he's also a Christie Award winner. Jen Duche, who used to be an NCWA member, has 2 books out. So that's 4 out of the 5 are published. Katie Vorder has 3 unpublished books, but if you go to her website, you can see she's done well in contests. So that accountability group helped 4 out of 5 of those people get published, and the other one looks like she's well on her way. So the question, we were talking about this, Daytona and Sarah and Gigi and I were talking about, so how do you make sure that you have the time? And I'm going to tell a story that I bet you most of you have heard, so you can shout out the answers. You won't be busting my punchline. It starts with a professor, brings in a big pickle jar to class, and he says, okay, I've got these rocks, and I'm going to fill this pickle jar up, and I want you guys to tell me when the pickle jar is full. How many of you heard this story? Okay, good story. I bet you remember it. So he starts filling up the pickle jar, gets to the top, and students say, okay, it's full. And he goes, oh, really? Then he pulls out a bucket of pebbles and starts dropping the pebbles down, and they fall in between the rocks, and finally fills it up to the top, and the students go, okay, yeah, now it's full, now it's full. So what's he do next? Sand, right. So he pulls out a bucket of sand, and he starts filling it full of sand, and then now they're going, okay, is he going to fool us again? And so then what's he do? Water. And so finally it's full. So too much of the time, what we do is we focus on the water or sand when we should be focusing on the big rocks. And I mean, they're big rocks. We were talking, Sarah and Daytona are both young mothers. They cannot leave the kid out on the back porch for a couple hours while they write. So they have to take care of your family. Most of us have day jobs. But what happens next is some people treat things that should be sand like rocks, like Facebook, right? Or TV. You probably have your own rock that you probably have your own rock that you know should be sand or maybe even water, but you're treating it like a rock. And this has actually been one of my struggles. This is definitely one of those do as I say, not as I do. And I started doing something, my accountability partner, Lori here, and I were talking about, so how do I make sure that I put in the time that I need? Because the problem that I have is we get up really early, we hit the gym, and then usually we take off for work, but I have a little bit of time in the morning that I use to read the paper. But when I come home after a day at work, I'm usually worn out. And maybe I'll write, and maybe I don't. Maybe mostly I don't. So what we agreed is I like to get up, and while I'm having breakfast, before I take off work, I like to read the paper. And I pour over it, and I know I'm probably one of only 5 subscribers in this room. Someone has to keep the Seattle Times in business. So what I do is I take my iPhone out, I sit down with breakfast, and I have my MacBook Air, and I set the timer for 30 minutes. And I write for 30 minutes, and it might be rewriting, it might be working on a scene, it might be doing an outline, but I do something focused on writing for 30 minutes. When it goes off, if I want to continue, maybe I've got a late start, then I'll continue to do that, but it makes me write for 30 minutes. And then I skim through the newspaper, which has now gone from being a rock to a pebble, and reward myself with that. So one of the other things I do, and actually they talk about this, Sean Acor talks about this in the book, The Happiness Advantage. You got to make things easy for yourself. So I've got a MacBook here, and I have my novel and a lot of the articles that I've written on stored in the cloud on what's called Box. If I want to access that novel or an article or something from my computer at home or my computer at work or something, if I've got time, I can do that from anywhere. So I can't make an excuse, I'd love to work on my novel, but it's back home. Because as long as I've got internet access and a computer that works with Microsoft Word, I can pick up anywhere. And there's a lot of other programs you can use like SkyDrive, Google Drive, and all that. Same thing, but that novel is available to me anytime I want to work on it, and when I don't want to work on it. The other thing I do is reward ourselves. Reward yourself for goals. And I'm going through this process right now because I achieved a major goal. What I'm going to do is I got to sit down and say, okay, some of the goals are going to be submitting it to other publishers. There may be other rewrites, working with my agent, but I'm going to set down specific goals, and I'll reward myself for those. And a small goal might be something like, I'm going to buy a book, or we're going to go to a movie, or I'm going to get a CD. One of the goals that I had was to submit a proposal to Beth Adams of Howard Books, because at the conference, she had heard me make my pitch, and she just totally got it. She wanted to know if John the Apostle worked at Amazon.com. I said, no, he doesn't, but he does live on Queen Anne Hill. So anyway, I set a goal of when I get that proposal done, which also required a rewrite of the book based on some of the stuff Mick told me, I was going to go to Bainbridge Island with Lori and get a bike jersey. Well, the plan was to go in the summer when we could bike over, take the ferry over and bike, but we did it last week and we drove. But I did get the bike jersey, and I set myself a reward to encourage myself to do that.